Hello, welcome to Stay at Home Storytime. I'm Mrs. H and I'm glad that you've joined me today. Today we're going to be talking about faithfulness. We're going to be reading two different books about faithfulness. Do you know what faithfulness is? Faithfulness means doing what we say we'll do. This Sunday, Pastor Tauchus is going to continue his sermon series on the fruit of the Spirit, and he'll be preaching specifically about the fruit of faithfulness. So when we look in the Bible and we look at the word faithful, it means to keep one's promises, to do what you say you'll do. God is the most faithful person, and we learn about faithfulness by learning about God. And so today our stories are going to teach us about that. Let's get ready to listen. I like to do the little wiggling to get all the wiggles out before we read. Are you ready? Get your fingers. We're going to wiggle. I wiggle my fingers and I wiggle my toes. I wiggle my shoulders and I wiggle my nose. Now there's no more wiggles left in me, so I'll sit as quiet can be. Okay, I think you're ready to listen to our story. Here we go. God is Faithful by Corinne Mackenzie. God is faithful. He has promised never to flood the world again. The rainbow is the sign of his promise. In the Bible it says, I have set my rainbow in the clouds. Never again will the waters become a flood to destroy all life. Genesis 9:14 and 15. God is faithful. He has promised that those who seek God shall find him. In the Bible, in Proverbs 8:17, it says, I love those who love me, and those who seek me find me. God is faithful. He has promised to hear and answer our prayers. In the Bible, in John chapter 14, verse 14, it says, You may ask me for anything in my name, and I will do it. God is faithful. He will never leave us or forget about us. It's in the Bible, in Hebrews 13:5. God has said, Never will I leave you, never will I forsake you. God is faithful. He has promised to guide us all through our life. It's in the Bible, in Psalm 48:14. For this God is our God forever and ever. He will be our guide even to the end. God is faithful. He never breaks a promise. He has promised to forgive us when we confess our sins to him. It's in the Bible. In 1 John 1:9 it says, If we confess our sins, he is faithful and just, and he will forgive us our sins and purify us from all unrighteousness. God is faithful. What an encouraging little book about faithfulness. Reminds us so many ways that the Bible shows us how God is faithful. You know, every promise that God makes to us in the Bible has either already come true, or it's currently true, or it's going to come true, because everything that God promises, he will do. He is faithful. You know, that makes me think, am I always faithful to what I say I'll do? Do I keep my promises? Do you? Do you do what you say you'll do? Are you faithful? That's an important question for us to ask ourselves, because God is faithful, and when we follow him, we learn how to be faithful, and then we have to put that into practice and do the things we say we'll do. Join me for another story. This time it's about a turtle named Tori and what she learned about faithfulness. Tori comes out of her shell. A book by Jane V. Clark and illustrated by Joe Hawks. When you are lonely, Tori comes out of her shell. It was fall, a season of change. The sound of chirping crickets turned from the sharpening of pencils. It was time for change for the turtle family, too. They had grown out of their log home in Woodland Pond, so they moved to Mulberry Meadow. Their new log home had plenty of room for Papa, Mama, Thomas, Ted, and Tori. On their first day in their new home, the young turtles all sat outside on a rock. They stretched their striped arms and backs and necks and enjoyed the warm sun. "Look, Ted," Thomas shouted, pointing across the pond. "I see some new friends. Race you!" And they were off. Left behind, Tori tucked her head and legs deep inside her shell. Now she looked just like the rock. "Tori, where are you?" called Mama, coming out from the kitchen and looking out over the pond. Finally spotting her, Mama said, "What are you doing out here all by yourself?" "Nothing," Tori replied. "Well, come on inside and we'll make sure everything is ready for your first day of school. Just think of all the new friends you're going to make." But Tori wasn't so sure that making new friends would be easy. What if no one wanted to talk to her? What if she had no one to play with during recess? Or even worse, what if someone made fun of her being slow as a turtle? "Come on," said Mama. "Let's pick out your outfit for school and get your backpack ready." "Okay," said Tori. She didn't tell Mama how worried she was. After Mama left, she spent the rest of the day by herself unpacking her shell collection. The next morning they left for school. Ted and Thomas saw their new friends, Buster Bunny and Henry Hedgehog, up ahead, and they caught up with them. Tori straggled behind by herself. At school, Tori was welcomed by her teacher, Miss Minnick, who asked Tori to introduce herself to the class. Tori pulled her head into her shell. Miss Minnick again asked, "Can you tell us something about yourself, dear?" Tori's voice echoed from inside her shell. "I'm Tori from Woodland Pond." Miss Minnick peered into Tori's shell and said, "Thank you, Tori. We're so glad you're here at Mulberry Meadow School. Please take a seat." Soon it was recess time. Tori sat by herself, her head tucked into her shell, watching the group that was jumping rope. All she could think about was the time that at her old school when she tried jumping rope only to trip and land on her back. She could still hear everyone laughing as she struggled to get herself right side up. She didn't want that to happen again. Miss Minnick walked over to Tori. "Wouldn't you like to play with the others?" she asked. No, thank you. I'm fine," said Tori, peeking out from her shell. Miss Minnick said, "I know it's hard to go to a new school. When I was a kid, I moved to a new town and realized I was the only skunk. I felt so lonely. On my first day of school, the fire alarm sounded by mistake and my worst fear was realized." "Oh no," Tori said. "That's right. I sprayed my new desk, my new classroom, my new teacher, and all my new classmates." "What did you do?" asked Tori. "I didn't know what to do, so I just put my head down and jammed my hands into my pockets. But I found a card in one of my pockets that my papa had given me. It was a verse from the great book that said, 'There is a friend who sticks closer than a brother.' It reminded me that Jesus would always be my friend, no matter what. I thought I would never have any friends after that, but I'll always remember how Sally Salamander came right up to me and said, 'Don't worry. Everyone is afraid of being embarrassed. I'm afraid of sliming my chair.' Wasn't that kind of her? And we're still friends to this day." Reaching into her pocket, Miss Minnick said, "You know, Tori, I've had this for a very long time, but I'd like you to have it." And she pulled out the tattered card her father had given her a long time ago and handed it to Tori. Then she rang the bell to call everyone in from recess. That Sunday, Mama, Papa, Ted, Thomas, and Tori went to their new church in Mulberry Meadow. Tori looked up, and right behind the preacher in big gold letters was a verse from the great book. Jesus says, "I am with you always." All week, Tori had been thinking about what Miss Minnick had said about Jesus always being her friend, and here it was again. "Wow, Lord,
You are always with me, even in my shell. Thank you for being my friend, Tori prayed silently. Monday morning at recess, Tori was hiding her head in her shell again. She still didn't want to try jumping rope. All of a sudden, she noticed something shiny moving across the playground. Looking closer, she saw it was the top of an old school bell with legs poking out from under it. Whoever was in there was having a hard time walking. Tori stuck her neck out and slowly walked over to see if she could help. Hello? She said. Are you okay in there? The bell became completely still. So Tori said again, Hello? Are you all right? Finally, two eyes peered out from under the edge and a voice called, Yes, I'm fine. No need to worry. Are you sure? Tori asked. Well, maybe, came the reply. Could you lift this off of me? Sure, Tori said. Do you need help carrying it somewhere? No, that's okay. I was wanting. Lifting up the bell, Tori could see that it was Gertie Gecko. What did you want? Asked Tori. A shell like yours. Ever since I saw you in your shell during recess, I wanted one too, said Gertie. You wanted a shell like mine? Why? Asked Tori, surprised. Sometimes I feel lonely and I don't know who to play with at recess. I wanted to have a shell like yours to hide in. Even if you're all by yourself in there, I bet it always feels full. So I found this bell to use, but then I got stuck. Gertie couldn't believe all that he had just come out tumbling out of her mouth, but she did feel a little better telling someone. Tori wanted to laugh. Gertie did look funny under that bell. But then she remembered how it felt to be lonely. I do like to hide in my shell sometimes, said Tori, but it gets awfully lonely in there. I'm finding out that hiding is not the answer. Maybe after school I can tell you what I've been learning. Would you? Asked Gertie. That would be wonderful. After school, Tori and Gertie walked home together. While they were walking, Tori took out the card that Miss Minnick had given her, and she read it with Gertie. There is a friend who sticks closer than a brother. Jesus is always with me, and he is with you too, Tori said. So even if I think I don't have any friends, Jesus is my friend. Really? Asked Gertie. Yes, said Tori. The preacher told us that God sent his son Jesus to this earth to make sure that we are never alone. When you ask him for forgiveness, he becomes your friend forever. Gertie and Tori walked home arm in arm. When they got to Tori's log, she asked Gertie, Would you like to come in and see my shell collection? I would love that, said Gertie. I can give you a shell of your own, but don't try to wear it. You aren't a turtle, you know. This time Tori did laugh, and Gertie laughed right along with her. As Gertie was leaving, Tori invited her to come to church with her. Gertie said yes. The next Sunday, the whole Gecko family squeezed into the pew with the Turtle family. Gertie poked Tori and pointed to the verse on the wall that says, Jesus says, I am with you always. Tori whispered to Gertie, See, I told you so. You can believe whatever the great book says. Tori and Gertie sang their new favorite hymn with their heads held high, so high they could see Miss Minnick on stage with the choir smiling back at them. Have faith in God when your pathway is lonely. He sees and knows all the ways you have trod. Never alone are the least of his children. Have faith in God. Have faith in God. God is always faithful.
What a great story. Tori the turtle learned that she's never alone because God has promised that he'll always be with her. And because he's faithful, he keeps his promises. One of the promises that God makes to you and I is that he promises he will stick closer than a brother. In other words, God will never leave us. He will never be mean to us and walk away from us. When we understand God's faithfulness and we experience it in our lives, then something else happens. We want to be that same kind of friend. We want to be faithful just like him. And one way we can do that is to be a friend that sticks closer than a brother, a friend who loves and cares about the other person more than we even care about ourselves. That's what Tori did. She was a faithful friend to Gertie the gecko. Are you a faithful friend? Have you ever been lonely? I know I have. In fact, I remember many times, especially when I was your age, that I would go to school and I would just feel lonely and left out at times. I wasn't the best person on the football team, or the football team. I didn't play football. On the kickball team. And oftentimes I was one of the last ones to get chosen. That made me feel lonely. Well, we learned from our story today that God is always with us, even when we feel alone. I remember when I was about 10 years old, I really started learning about the kind of friend that God wanted to be to me, that He loved me, but that my sin kept us apart. And I learned how Jesus died on the cross to forgive my sins so that I could be friends with God. And now God is my very best friend. I talk to Him many times during the day. And whenever I'm feeling alone or having a hard time, I know that He is faithful and that He is with me. I hope that you know Jesus and God in the same way, that you know them as a faithful friend. I hope that as you go through your week this week, you'll think about whether you're a faithful friend to other people. Remind your mom and dad I sent a few things along with the newsletter this week that you can use to talk about our story time and some things they can print off for you. I miss you, and I look forward to seeing you hopefully soon. Bye-bye.